Robert Duvall just shook Hollywood to its core. After more than 60 years in the game, the 94-year-old legend finally dropped a truth bomb no one saw coming. "There are 4 people I just couldn't stand," he reportedly confessed, and the industry hasn't stopped buzzing since. For decades, Robert Duvall stood as a symbol of class and integrity, the no-nonsense actor everyone respected. Sharp, focused, and always professional, he was the man directors dreamed of working with and co-stars admired. But behind that cool, composed exterior, something darker had been brewing. Memories and grudges buried deep under decades of silence. Now at 94, the Oscar-winning icon decided he's done keeping secrets. "I've kept my mouth shut for decades," Duvall said, "but at this age, what am I waiting for? It's time to tell the truth." Just like that, the quietest man in Hollywood became the loudest headline overnight. Fans were stunned, and even his peers couldn't believe it. This wasn't just anyone talking. This was Robert Duvall, the Hollywood gentleman who never had a bad word for anyone. For him to finally name names after half a century means those grudges cut deep, deeper than anyone imagined. People close to the star say these weren't small disagreements on set. These were explosive tensions that reshaped performances, delayed productions, and even changed how some of Hollywood's greatest classics turned out. Can you imagine a film you thought you knew being built on real-life resentment behind the scenes? That's the kind of drama Duvall just confirmed. Now the big question has the entire industry on edge. Who are the 4 names? And what really went down behind those golden-era film sets everyone thought were full of friendship and respect? The suspense is real, and Hollywood insiders are scrambling to find out before Duvall spills it all himself. But before those names drop, there's one thing you have to understand: why he chose now to break his lifelong silence. People close to the actor say this wasn't some burst of anger or a final act of revenge. It came from reflection, the kind that hits when you've lived nearly a century and seen history rewritten. He reached a point where he felt the record needed to be set straight, a longtime associate revealed. He's watched documentaries and retrospectives twist the truth, turning real tension and toxic relationships into fairy tale stories of harmony. That never sat right with him. Apparently, the final spark came during a recent Hollywood tribute celebrating Duvall's career. Sitting in the audience, watching people rewrite his story with smiles and fake nostalgia, something in him snapped. He decided it was time to speak. No filters, no diplomacy, no more pretending. Hollywood's about to hear the truth straight from Robert Duvall's mouth. And it sounds like some legends won't come out looking as spotless as we thought. As Robert Duvall sat in that glittering tribute audience, the crowd cheering and the screen flashing his greatest moments, he couldn't help but feel disgusted. Those film montages showed smiling co-stars and heartwarming memories, but to him, it was all fake. Behind those so-called wonderful collaborations were faces he'd secretly despised for decades. The speeches praised creative partnerships and deep friendships, yet Duvall sat there remembering how one actor used to deliberately step on his lines to ruin takes. Another even tried to get him fired from a role that later defined his entire career. At 94, with an Oscar, countless nominations, and nothing left to prove, Duvall decided he was done playing along with Hollywood's make-believe harmony. He'd carried the truth for too long, and he wasn't afraid to let it out anymore. But it wasn't about revenge, not entirely. It was about honesty. He said he owed that to the younger generation of actors who deserved to know what really happens behind those studio smiles. These young actors deserve to know the truth, Duvall said firmly. Even the greatest films aren't always born from friendship. Sometimes they come from conflict, jealousy, and chaos behind the scenes. That statement hit hard. And what came next hit even harder. The first name on his list, Dustin Hoffman. Duvall called him the credit thief who never stopped. The revelation stunned everyone, especially because the two had once been seen as kindred spirits, almost brothers in struggle. Dustin and I were struggling actors together in New York, Duvall explained. We were friends, or at least I thought we were. But friendship meant something very different to him than it did to me. Back in the early 1960s, the two shared a cramped New York apartment, both hustling for stage work and living off cheap meals and big dreams. But Duvall now says that brotherhood slowly turned into rivalry and betrayal. According to Duvall, Dustin wasn't just competing, he was copying. I'd work for weeks on a role, he said. Rehearse in our apartment, develop a unique take, then suddenly Dustin would audition for the same part using my exact approach, sometimes word for word. He didn't stop there. When Hoffman got the roles, he'd tell others Duvall had inspired him. That's a fancy word for theft, Duvall said with a cold smirk. And it didn't end once they both hit Hollywood. Even during True Grit in 1969, where Duvall played outlaw Ned Pepper, Hoffman would call him constantly asking for help with his own project, Midnight Cowboy. I spent hours on those calls, Duvall recalled, helping him find Ratso Rizzo's voice, helping him build that character. But when Midnight Cowboy blew up, Hoffman took all the credit. Then I read an interview, Duvall said bitterly, where he claimed he developed the voice after studying homeless people in New York for months. Not a single mention of our talks. Nothing. That was the final straw for Duvall. The breaking point came just a couple of years later, when both actors were being considered for the lead in The French Connection in 1971. That's when, according to insiders, the quiet rivalry between them turned into outright hostility, a feud that Duvall never forgot and never forgave. Now, after decades of silence, he's making sure the world knows the truth. Hollywood may have written it off as friendly competition, but Duvall's version paints a whole different picture. One full of betrayal, bitterness, and stolen glory. That career-defining role in The French Connection eventually went to Gene Hackman, and that's when Robert Duvall had enough. That was when I stopped taking his calls, he said flatly. I realized some people never stop taking from others. They just get better at pretending it's collaboration. That line alone sent chills through Hollywood. And according to insiders from the original French Connection production, Duvall wasn't exaggerating. Dustin Hoffman allegedly went even further than stealing creative ideas. He reportedly tried to tank Duvall's chances of landing the role altogether. During the casting process, Hoffman supposedly told director William Friedkin that Duvall was difficult and uncooperative, even citing their old theater days as proof. That false image, Duvall believes, cost him the role that could have completely reshaped his career. That crossed a line, Duvall said sharply. That wasn't competition anymore. That was sabotage. Years later, Duvall confronted Hoffman face-to-face about spreading that rumor, and Hoffman denied everything, but Duvall wasn't buying it. I heard it directly from Friedkin himself, he said. Despite the anger, Duvall stayed silent for decades, still showing up at events, panels, and industry tributes, where he and Hoffman often crossed paths. He even gave polite professional remarks about Hoffman's performances, never once letting the public see the frost between them. That calm exterior fooled everyone. For years, Hollywood thought the two men shared mutual respect, but now it's clear, beneath the smiles was a quiet feud that lasted half a lifetime. But as explosive as that story was, it wasn't the one that shook Hollywood to its foundation. Because the next name Duvall dropped, it was a bombshell: Marlon Brando. The most destructive ego I ever encountered, Duvall declared without blinking. In a single sentence, he shattered one of Hollywood's greatest myths, the idea that Brando's genius made him untouchable. Great performances don't always come from great relationships, Duvall explained. Sometimes they come despite them. That's the truth about this business, and nobody wants to talk about it." Then, with that same calm authority that made him a legend, Duvall said the words that sent reporters scrambling and social media into a frenzy. "Marlon Brando, the most destructive ego I ever encountered." The room went silent because this wasn't gossip. It was Robert Duvall, one of the most respected actors alive, calling out one of the greatest of all time. He didn't deny Brando's talent. In fact, he acknowledged it. He was a genius, no question, Duvall admitted, but he was also chaos personified. A man who'd sabotage entire productions just to prove he could. Those who've worked in the industry knew exactly what he meant, that dangerous mix of brilliance and control that made Brando both a marvel and a nightmare to work with. Their biggest clash happened during the filming of The Chase in 1966, a project now mostly forgotten, though its cast was packed with legends. Marlon Brando, Robert Duvall, Jane Fonda, and Robert Redford. The set was supposed to be a powerhouse of talent, but according to Duvall, it turned into a battleground of egos, and Brando was right at the center of it all. Hollywood had always worshipped Brando's mystery, his rebellion, his artistry. But Duvall just tore the curtain down, revealing the darker side of that legend. And suddenly, one of the most celebrated figures in film history didn't seem so untouchable anymore. What audiences never saw during The Chase was the chaos boiling just outside the frame, a psychological war that would change Robert Duvall's entire outlook on acting and professionalism forever. Behind those polished performances, the set had turned into a battlefield of mind games, and Marlon Brando was leading the charge. According to Duvall, Brando had a cruel habit of twisting his performances just to mess with everyone else's work. He'd deliberately change his acting from take to take, Duvall revealed, just to make the footage impossible to edit. If Brando didn't like a director's vision, he'd go one step further, deliberately ruining other actors' scenes. He called it protecting the integrity of the performance. Duvall, however, had a different name for it: professional sabotage. The tension built for weeks, growing thicker with every scene they shared. Then came the breaking point, a key monologue, one of Duvall's most important moments in the entire film. According to several crew members who have now backed Duvall's version, Brando kept interfering in the most subtle ways possible. During Duvall's takes, he'd make small, nearly inaudible noises off-camera, quiet enough that only the microphones caught them, but loud enough to ruin every single shot. After the fifth ruined take, Duvall finally snapped. "I confronted him," he said, and that moment changed everything, not just between the two men, but in how Duvall saw Hollywood itself. He just smiled, Duvall remembered bitterly. Then he said, "Maybe you should be stronger in your choices." That line cut deep. "That was Marlon," Duvall added. "He'd sabotage you, then twist it to make you look weak." It was the ultimate power move, and Duvall never forgot it. What makes this confession even more shocking is how completely it flips the long-standing public story about their relationship. For decades, Duvall had publicly praised Brando as one of his biggest influences, calling him a genius in interviews and paying tribute to his artistry. But now we know that praise came with a heavy dose of pain. The two would cross cinematic paths again in The Godfather, one of the most legendary films ever made. But the two never shared a single scene together. At the time, fans thought it was just a scheduling coincidence. After this revelation, that coincidence feels more like a carefully planned separation. "I learned more from watching Marlon than from anyone else," Duvall admitted. "But what I learned wasn't just about acting. I learned how not to treat colleagues. I learned that genius doesn't excuse cruelty." That line hit Hollywood like a thunderclap. the perfect mix of admiration and disdain that only someone who truly knew Brando could express. It explained everything: why Duvall had kept his silence for so long, why he'd never spoken ill of Brando until now. It wasn't fear, it was complicated respect, mixed with disgust. But just when people thought the shocks were over, Duvall dropped the next name. The revelation that followed wasn't just unexpected, it cut deep into the heart of Hollywood's favorite myths. The third name on his list? James Caan. Duvall described him as competitive to the point of malice. That one stung, because Caan wasn't just any co-star, he was family, at least on screen. The two had made history together in The Godfather, with Caan's fiery portrayal of Sonny Corleone becoming one of the most iconic performances in film history. Yet, according to Duvall, even that legendary collaboration was far from peaceful behind the scenes. The tension, he hinted, was so intense that it sometimes mirrored the violence of the movie itself. And as Duvall prepared to reveal exactly what went down between them, Hollywood knew the calm, quiet legend had finally decided to burn the myth of movie brotherhood to the ground. Just like Tom Hagen, calm, strategic, always 2 steps ahead, Robert Duvall played his part flawlessly on screen. Together, he and James Caan created what critics still call one of the most real and emotionally charged brotherly bonds ever filmed. "Jimmy and I built one of the most believable brother relationships in movie history," Duvall said, "and we did it while barely speaking off camera." That line alone says it all. Their tension started early, even before the cameras rolled. During the first Godfather rehearsals, both men were quietly fighting for dominance inside the powerhouse ensemble. Duvall, known for his discipline and focus, tried to keep things professional, but Caan's intensity crossed the line more than once. Jimmy was competitive to the point of malice, Duvall recalled. He'd deliberately try to upstage everyone, especially me. If I had an important moment or a key line, he'd start fidgeting, doing something dramatic with his hands, or making exaggerated faces. Anything to steal the shot. That subtle battle for attention exploded during the now legendary family meeting scene, the one where the Corleones argue about going to war with the rival families. Between takes, Duvall was quietly talking with director Francis Ford Coppola about Tom Hagen's inner motivations when Caan cut in with a smirk. "He tossed off this little remark," Duvall said, "something about me overthinking my role as a glorified secretary." That was it. The moment the friendship officially died. "That's when I decided we'd never be friends," Duvall said coldly. "I also decided Tom Hagen would always watch Sonny in every scene, like a hawk watching a storm. It fit the character perfectly because that's exactly what Tom would do with a hothead like Sonny." Ironically, that real-life tension gave their performances extra bite, and the result was cinematic gold. What makes this revelation so wild is how perfectly both men kept their animosity hidden for decades. Red carpet events, press tours, Godfather anniversaries. They sold the image of lifelong brothers without missing a beat. "When we were promoting the film, we both knew what was at stake," Duvall said. "We weren't going to let personal issues destroy something that important. So we smiled, told the right stories, and played our parts. That's also acting. And honestly, that's what separates Duvall from so many others. The professionalism, the quiet pride, the refusal to let personal grudges hurt the art. That level of control says more about his integrity than any award ever could. For years, that discipline kept these feuds buried, hidden behind fake smiles and polished Hollywood charm. But the next revelation went deeper, much deeper. Because while his feuds with Brando and Caan were fueled by creative conflict, the final name on Duvall's list came from something far more personal. It wasn't about ego or rivalry. It was about betrayal. The fourth name, Robert Redford. Duvall didn't mince words. He called him the fraud behind the golden image. Yes, that Robert Redford, Hollywood's golden boy. The charming, soft-spoken icon who built a decades-long reputation as the model of grace, intellect, and integrity. The man who stood for clean living, environmental activism, and artistic independence. For years, Redford's public image had been spotless, untouchable. But according to Duvall, the truth behind that golden glow was a lot darker. Everyone saw the perfect gentleman, Duvall hinted, but that wasn't the man I knew. And with that statement, the crowd listening to his interview fell silent. Because if Robert Duvall, one of Hollywood's most respected legends, was calling out Robert Redford, it meant the golden age of politeness in Hollywood's elite circle had just ended. This wasn't just another feud. This was the unraveling of an entire Hollywood illusion, and Duvall made it clear. He wasn't holding anything back anymore. Robert Duvall didn't hold back when it came to Robert Redford. He built the perfect public persona, Duvall said sharply. The serious craftsman, the idealist, the man of principle. But the reality I experienced was something else entirely. Behind that polished charm and golden smile, Duvall claimed, hid a calculating opportunist, someone who treated crew members like furniture and saw other actors as obstacles in his way. Their clash ignited during the making of The Natural in 1984, a film that should have been a peaceful, nostalgic collaboration between two Hollywood giants. Duvall played sports columnist Max Mercy, while Redford embodied the baseball legend Roy Hobbs. But behind the camera, the set was anything but harmonious. What should have been a smooth shoot turned sour fast, Duvall recalled. He described Redford's behavior as entitled and dismissive. He'd keep entire crews waiting for hours while he handled business calls, Duvall said. Not because he was preparing for the role, but because he was on the phone closing deals. Meanwhile, dozens of people just stood around getting paid to wait while daylight vanished. That's not commitment to the craft. That's arrogance. As the delays piled up, so did the tension. And by the time they reached their key confrontation scenes, those explosive moments between journalist and legend, the personal friction had seeped into the performances. What the audience saw as raw intensity was, in truth, pure frustration caught on film. But the biggest cracks showed when Duvall realized Redford wasn't just hard to work with. He was trying to rewrite the movie itself. According to Duvall, Redford pressured director Barry Levinson to trim down his part entirely. He argued that my scenes, the ones where Max Mercy questions Roy Hobbs's legend, weren't necessary, Duvall explained. It became clear he didn't want a strong presence opposite him. It wasn't about storytelling. It was about control, making sure he dominated every frame. That revelation floored people who knew Redford's reputation as the noble artist. The irony was brutal. On screen, Redford played a hero whose myth is challenged by a reporter. And off-screen, he was trying to silence that same reporter's role in real life. Duvall couldn't ignore the hypocrisy. He loved the idea of truth and integrity when it made him look good, he said. But when the truth got too close, he'd shut it down. What infuriated Duvall most was the enormous gap between Redford's image and his behavior. He'd stand on stage at Sundance preaching artistic purity, Duvall said, his voice rising. Then he'd walk onto a movie set and demand veto power over casting and final cut privileges like a studio boss. The contrast was staggering. Hollywood's golden symbol of collaboration, acting like a corporate gatekeeper behind the scenes. Crew members, Duvall claimed, were too intimidated to speak out, and many just rolled with it to protect their careers. But Duvall? He saw through the act. The man who preached independence, he said, was the same man quietly pulling strings to control everything around him. And then came what Duvall called the most damning moment during post-production on The Natural. That's when, according to him, Redford's need for control reached its peak, revealing the truth about how far he'd go to protect his own image. Hollywood had always treated Redford like the moral compass of the industry, but Duvall's words cracked that halo wide open. The idea that America's golden hero could be that manipulative hit the film world like a thunderclap. And if what Duvall hinted next was true, the legend of Robert Redford was about to lose its shine for good. Robert Duvall wasn't one to back down, not even from Hollywood royalty. He confronted Robert Redford face to face about all the behind-the-scenes manipulation, the schedule delays, the ego-driven edits, the constant power plays. And what happened next has haunted him ever since. Crew members who were there say Redford didn't flinch. He looked Duvall dead in the eye and said coldly, "You're a character actor, Bob. I'm a movie star. We're not playing by the same rules." That line burned into Duvall's memory forever. That moment crystallized everything, he admitted later. The fraud behind the golden image. "I never looked at him the same way again." And just like that, the curtain dropped on Hollywood's favorite illusion. This final revelation, more shocking than any that came before, didn't just expose Robert Redford, it cracked open the whole system. From one Robert to another, it forced the industry to question everything it thought it knew about its so-called good guys. The golden image of Hollywood's clean-cut icons was suddenly showing its cracks, and everyone felt the quake. In the days following Duvall's explosive interview, Hollywood went into full meltdown mode. The industry was split between disbelief, denial, and quiet confirmation. Publicists scrambled to control the damage, while insiders whispered that Duvall had only said out loud what others had whispered for years. Representatives for both Dustin Hoffman and Robert Redford, the only two still alive from Duvall's infamous list, released carefully worded statements. They expressed surprise at his remarks while tiptoeing around the real issue, emphasizing their deep respect for his legacy and contributions to film. But the silence between the lines said everything. More revealing, though, were the quiet confirmations pouring in from behind the scenes. Crew members from The Natural backed Duvall's story, describing Redford's on-set behavior as demanding, distant, and control-obsessed. A former assistant director from The Godfather confirmed what many had long suspected, that the tension between Duvall and James Caan during filming was palpable and sometimes borderline hostile. Even The Godfather director, Francis Ford Coppola, didn't deny it. While staying diplomatic, he said, "The chemistry you see on screen sometimes comes from very complicated personal dynamics behind the camera." That says it all. But the most surprising reaction came from other actors, some of the biggest names in Hollywood, who reached out to Duvall privately. They thanked him, said a source close to the actor. They said, "You said what many of us have experienced but never felt safe enough to express." That's when people realized this wasn't just gossip. It was a long overdue reckoning. As for Duvall himself, he seems at peace, not angry, not bitter, just finally free from carrying all those secrets. In a follow-up statement, he wrote, "I've given 60 years to this industry and always treated it with respect. Part of that respect means being honest about its realities, both good and bad." He made it clear his goal wasn't to destroy reputations, but to fix the false history that Hollywood had been selling for decades. These weren't petty disagreements, he explained. They were sustained behaviors that affected productions and people's livelihoods. Those truths deserve to be part of the record, not just the polished version we've all agreed to pretend is real. And maybe that's why his words hit so hard, because Duvall didn't just name names, he shattered myths. He peeled back the layers of glamour to show the ruthless ambition, the quiet cruelty, and the fragile egos that built Hollywood's so-called golden age. As the industry scrambles to recover from his truth-telling, one question still lingers. Is this really the end? Because in his final chilling words, Duvall hinted there's more he's not yet said. "Those four stood out," he said cryptically, "but they weren't alone." Hollywood has always been better at creating myths than facing them. But maybe, just maybe, it's finally time for the opposite. Like, share, and subscribe to America's Hidden Gold, where the truth behind the legends always shines through.